Welcome to People's Republic with Brian Griffith. We bring you news and analysis from the front lines of the global struggle for social and economic justice. I'm your host, Brian Griffith, and here's what's going down this week in your backyard and across the world. Welcome to People's Republic. My name is Brian Griffith, and this week we are covering the struggle to prevent the erection of a border wall along the so-called border between Texas and Mexico. There is currently a very large movement by border communities, including the Carrizo Comecrudo tribe, to try and prevent the construction of this wall, which would not only have a massively destructive impact on the communities there, but also would have caused massive destruction to the environment in sort of a crucial time of environmental protection. So we're going to spend the first part of the show talking about all of this and more. To talk about all this, we are joined by Juan Mancias, the chairman of the Carrizo Comecrudo tribe. Thank you very much, Juan. We're very happy to have you on the show.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
So let's talk about let's start with the Trump attempting to declare a so-called national emergency to get funding for this border wall. You are at the border. I think all of us kind of know, being in a border state, that there is no national emergency along the border. That if there is a national emergency along the border, the so-called border, it is in fact Trump that is the national emergency. It is in fact to me, the destruction of the environment and the destruction of sovereignty of local communities that is the national emergency. How do you kind of feel, and what is the situation on the ground at the moment around that area?
Well, I mean, just today we had, a raising awareness issue down at the levee by the Butterfly Center to make people understand that we're here and we're concerned about what is happening there. And we realize the fact that the Butterfly Center has been kind of taken off the list to be, sacrificed, and so has La Lomita, and so has, the Vincent State Park. But it doesn't leave any room for the smaller landowners that are sacrificing, a lot of their land, because they may have like anywhere from, 4 or 5 acres to 75 acres, and those are still being affected. And it seems like he's attacking all the people that are in need of, legal assistance in every way to try and stop them from terrorizing their land anymore. And you're right, I do believe that the only crisis we have here is, a big baby wanting to play with some toys and they keep telling them you can't play with that toy. It's only for grown-ups. Yeah,
I think that's real important for people to know that, the real crisis, as we're talking about, is really more caused by Trump than anything. So I know that construction of a section of the border wall that Trump keeps trying to push through, part of this construction has been halted in areas, natural and historic areas in the Rio Grande Valley. Part of that's been blocked by kind of a last-minute provision in the budget deal. The 5 areas that have been kind of mentioned so far: the National Butterfly Center, the historic La Lomita Chapel, Benson Rio Grande Valley State Park, the site of the SpaceX commercial spaceport, and the Santa Ana Wildlife Refuge. Is that still the case, that construction has halted there for now? And again, what does that really mean in terms of long-term protection against this construction of the border wall here, especially for those people in areas who have not been kind of singled out by this?
Well, what it means is that again, we're talking about the smaller landowners that are still being affected and are still being attacked by eminent domain, and their property being seized to accommodate the ego of a person who doesn't even know what it's like to work for their homes. And these people have worked as migrant workers for years, and some of them have been around for 40 years in their homes, and their home now is being attacked. They were migrant workers at one time, and now they don't have any kind of a retirement or any kind of assistance to be able to deal with the attack that they're getting, and that's why it's really it's traumatic to a lot of people and what's being done.
I'd also like to turn to specifically the work of the Carrizo Comecrudo Nation, which I think is so crucial here, and what you've been doing, especially this past year. On January 19th, the Carrizo Comecrudo tribe and volunteers reestablished a permanent autonomous village near the Eli Jackson Cemetery in Pharr, Texas, called Yalui Village, complete with a tents, kitchen, solar-powered energy. So this is a kind of attempt, I think, to claim some sovereignty, to let people know that the border wall is not being built at the border at all, is one of the things that Juan Mancias mentioned. So I'm wondering, how you see this project going forward, and how I know from my understanding you're also working with veterans coming from the Standing Rock, struggle that took place in North Dakota. So I'm wondering how you see that project coming together and what progress has been made on that.
Well, we've been able to be very, very productive in the area of starting to create a village, and we're going by the standing of Create a Village, Save the Earth. A lot of our people from first contact 500 years ago has created, kind of a vacuum of historical information, and a lot of the so-called scholars and historians and archaeologists and anthropologists in the area always seem to stumble over really doing good research about the origins of the original people of the land, which in this case were the Ixtocna people who spoke a Ho'oko'am dialect and who are not Guahuiltecos, and even though that they've been thrown into these catch-all terms by a very assumptive and presumptive academia that for a long time hasn't done their research, but or even asked us or consulted us, and so you get these kind of mentalities of ongoing racist ideals of that we don't exist, that Native people, there's no Native people in Texas, but in reality we know that our people are here and have always been here, and that's why we try to continue to raise the awareness of our relatives and our neighbors around here. And it's not, and the thing is, they continue to call us the protesters, and we don't want to compromise our land and compromise our identities, to people that don't understand or haven't even walked with us, but only want to erase us from history. And to me, anybody who really knows what's going on, that's ethnic cleansing. That's the genocide of the Americas. Texas has a commission for genocide and Holocaust, and they only look at seven Holocausts and genocides that have occurred worldwide in the last 200 years, but they never see they don't recognize the American Holocaust, and there is an American Holocaust, and it's that continual appropriation and defacement and belittling of the Native person, and when we talk about being Native, we talk about this group emphasis of being tribal and having a tribal identity, because we were here at the time of first contact, and we were here for a reason. And here in these lands, there used to be an abundance of our medicine that used to go here, and with all the citrus industry that was put in here, destroyed a lot of that medicine because of the pesticides that were put in, and that brought in to promote the oranges and the lemons and all of that, and it killed our medicine. It killed the native plants that were here, and so now we have nothing but invasive plants that are part of the lands here.
One of the things I've tried to make an attempt to kind of read about and also talk about on my show is just how kind of balanced the indigenous cultivation of land was across the Americas for so long and for such a vast expanse before the arrival of Columbus, before colonization took place. And it really people have this sort of idea that the U.S. was either quote unquote natural or whatnot, but if you look at it, the actual indigenous cultivation of sort of, I don't want to say artificial forest, but sort of human made and human kind of cultivated forests, and the ways that indigenous peoples were able to really balance all of the needs. All of that has been so completely wiped out with kind of the capitalist system under which we currently live, where there's this need for kind of these not need, but there's this preference for these kind of monocrops, which can produce a profit or whatnot, which can be sold, but there's no kind of balance there. And I think we're seeing that we're seeing the sort of environmental destruction that has, and the construction of the border wall is such a perfect place to explore that environmental destruction. It's kind of the perfect case study because one of the places that is being really affected is the 100-acre National Butterfly Center, right, which is set to lose, I think, 70 of those acres out of the 100 are going to be essentially seized and destroyed for this. This is, of course, at a time when we're already losing massive insect populations. There was a study released a while back, and you can read about this in the New York Times article, "The Insect Apocalypse is Here," where, for instance, the monarch butterfly population has increased has decreased rather up to 90%, and you can see similar decreases in insect populations across many species. There's really this destruction is going to be absolutely horrific at this particular point in time. And I don't know, to me, to kind of tie all this together, I think it's important to understand how the Carrizo Comecrudo tribe and other sort of indigenous peoples have kind of come together, to protect this crucial environmental, this place of kind of environmental preservation at this particular point. I'm wondering how you've been able to kind of work with the National Butterfly Center for this kind of common interest.
Well, that's what we're working at, because I think they have the right perspective of trying to have a corridor, for a wildlife corridor for a lot of the wildlife that's still left, and regardless of the gentrification and urbanization of these lands, and we want to make sure that we're able to give the environment a chance, the natural environment, a chance to come back with the natural resources of native plants, and which will also help maybe the wildlife come back, and to promote the health of the whole fauna in the area. And that's why we're here. We want to do the same thing, especially some of these villages that were coming in. To us, we see it. We don't call them camps, because camps are temporary, but villages are forever. And we want to make sure that we leave that sign of permanence there with the native plants. It's not like we're taking over, because like I tell everybody, it's not that we own the land that owns us, and eventually, that's what is happening here. People need to understand that everywhere they walk, they're walking on top of our ancestors, and a lot of people are being very disrespectful of that, and they're not aware of the cultures that are here that still exist. Like things with the Dia de los Muertos that occur in much of the population here along the Rio Grande. People need to be aware that there were people that lived on both sides of this river. It wasn't something that, just with a piece of paper took away all the native people in South Texas. With the Guadalupe Hidalgo Treaty, that now they don't even want to honor the Guadalupe Hidalgo Treaty. So those things are the things that are affecting, our reclaiming of the wildlife, reclaiming of the plants, of the native plants that are here. There's things that are completely out of whack, and it's not about who throws the best protest, but who brings a better awareness with a more decent follow up, and knowing that there's something going to be achieved after it's all said and done. That we're not here just to create more problems, but to develop solutions.
This seems to be also kind of a long-term thing. I think we've at this point seen, what I guess I would say from my perspective, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but from my perspective, there seems to have been kind of resurgence of indigenous claims to treaties, which are still in effect, not only with regard to Standing Rock, but also here at the border, as well as the Wet'suwet'en in Canada, who are attempting to also set up villages in their kind of traditional homeland to essentially protect against the construction of oil pipelines there, which would destroy so much kind of pristine wilderness in that area, or destroy kind of the especially again targeting the waters, the oil pipelines there in Canada with going through Wet'suwet'en territory. Same thing with Standing Rock. Those oil pipelines, if constructed, are going to have a massive environmental impact, and so there's this from what I've seen kind of resurgence of indigenous people reasserting not only these treaties, but just the kind of historical claims to territory that I think are real important.
Well, with us here, we're dealing with three monstrous LNGs that they're trying to build at the mouth of the Rio Grande as well, down by Port Isabel and South Padre Island. And we're fighting those LNGs because one of the LNGs, they want to build right on top of one of our sacred sites. So we're actually creating that from happening, and that's where we're at with all of this right now. And so a lot of this is connected, all along the river, because that's why the villages are. And I mean, after they burnt our villages, a lot of our people were displaced in many ways. And that's why we're here, trying to make a difference by raising the awareness and educating people. Not just by coming in here and aggravating people, but in Texas we know that for a fact that if it's not coming from some of the daughters of the Republic of Texas, or some of Bowie's and Crockett's people, it's not education. I mean, they're the ones that are defining what education is, and I'm saying education in Texas has become a sort of activism if you really want to tell the history correctly. And that's what's happening right now, right here, and that's why we're struggling very hard to let people know that we're just educating people. We're trying to tell them that we want to reclaim the land for the goodness of the land and for the goodness of the wildlife that is being threatened. And of course, at the same time, so people know that we never left, that we haven't gone anywhere. When they start telling us that we're just fraternal organizations because it accommodates the powers that may be at the time because they're racist, we need to be able to say, hey, we're more than that. We're a people of this land, and we've always been here, and we're not going anywhere.
What have been sort of the misconceptions beyond the obvious racism that I'm sure you see every day? What are sort of the things that you feel are most kind of in need? Or what are some of the things that you feel people most need that education about? Obviously, the fact that you kind of have that you've never really left the land, but then also maybe around the, for instance, border or other things, that the so-called border, or other things that you feel people should just generally know more about.
Well, I mean, I think that it's necessary to do some good research on, the people of the land, and to understand it better. That there was one language, and that language belonged to a people that were here, and in that language, our ceremonies remained, our songs remained, and we're still here, and all we're doing is just trying to educate people. We're not trying to take anything away from them because nobody owns everything. Because once you cross over, you can't take it with you. So it's part of knowing that difference and being able to recognize that it's an education point for all of us.
understanding the difference between sort of a ownership by sort of like a more communal ownership and a more understanding of stewardship versus kind of the understanding that of ownership that, you know, so many kind of settler colonial societies have, where it really is about exploitation of the resources. That also seems to be a very important point in all these struggles.
Well, and that's what it is. It's just you know, raising the awareness, and when you do that, you're educating people, and that's what we're all about. We're just trying to educate everyone, you know, and maybe even to the point of saying we need equal representation. People need to speak for those people that of the land, and in a form of saying, hey, you know, we're here, we're not going anywhere. We may not be federally recognized because a lot of us, like me personally, my opinion is I don't want to recognize everything that this government has done to my people, and I'm concerned about how we're going to do that. So, you know, that's why we try to educate our own people with the language, and try to educate our people with the ceremonies and the way of life that we've always lived. And a lot of it has to do with being friendly. You know, we're not a bad people. We weren't the bad people in the first place. We were the people that were invaded. You know. And so it doesn't make us bad if we're trying to protect that which what we believe in. And that's what we're trying to do now. We're trying to protect that which we believe in, and that's the land. Those are our ancestors, and we want to take care of them. So,
for those people who might be interested in the work that that you and the rest of the Carrizo Comecrudo tribe are doing, where can people find more information, and where can people get involved?
You can go to www.carrizocomecrudotribeoftexas.org or www.carrizocomecrudo.com, or go to our Facebook page. It's also the Carrizo Comecrudo Tribe of Texas. You want more information on that? We have a lot of the books that are the bibliographies that are there that people can look at and find out more of our presence in South Texas, and actually all over Texas. It was just that by the late 1800s, we were kind of just forced into a section around Mission, Texas, and a lot of the tribes were being displaced, were being absorbed by us. So I mean, we're still here, and we got all kinds of information and documents that attest to our presence. But Brian, thank you. I appreciate your help. I mean, I appreciate being on your show.
Thank you very much. It really, it's an honor to have you on, and it's an honor to finally get to speak to you. We have a couple minutes left. If there's anything else you'd like to kind of discuss, or you feel that people should generally sort of know about, because you know it's hard to tell. Even broadcasting here in Texas, it's far enough from the border that where it's kind of hard to tell, you know, what it is that's going on there. But I know, you know, kind of earlier, the National Butterfly Center had posted that there had been you know, police brought in and bulldozers ready to begin the construction of the walls. So maybe if you have a couple minutes, if you can give us kind of a rundown.
We were. They came in on Monday, and we went out there, and some of our people took pictures of what was going on, and we were not allowed to be on the levee, so we tried to clarify, you know, the trespassing issues, and they're still kind of vague and up in the air, and they're not sure either. I don't even think the Border Patrol or even the International Boundaries of Waters Commission is quite sure of it. But you know, I know that the private landowners have a right to, you know, to deny access to the sides of the levee, but apparently the levee on top, the surface, is owned by the IBWC, and so they're the ones that are making, you know, those accusation of trespassing. And I mean, you know, they just let us go see what's going on. Why if they're digging any bones, then we'd be fine. But they're not allowing any of that to happen. You know, so we need to have the monitors there to see, because they said that they would stop any excavation if they found anything. But when they're tearing up and cutting down trees and brush and stuff, I mean, it's not good either, because it's affecting the wildlife, and a lot of those wildlife, like the ocelot that lives in the trees, are being affected. And people need to let their senators, state senators, and U.S. congressmen and U.S. senators know that how these things affect our lifeways here and how we're living in South Texas. A lot of these people, they're working with their hands every day and trying to stay alive. They're migrant workers. They own these places, and they work very hard to maintain what they have. And they're U.S. citizens, and they're being mistreated, like some kind of indentured servants by, some guy in Washington who wants to play with all the toys and doesn't get permission to. So we'd appreciate, even sending letters to the Bureau of Indian Affairs on our behalf so that maybe we can, have a stronger presence here, and maybe our people can get some kind of a land trust where we can take care of our lands and always point out the fact of what's going on here. Those would be helpful,
Yeah, and we'll try and provide links on the show social media about that. So, yeah, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. We've been talking with Juan Mancias. He's the chairman of the Carrizo Comecrudo tribe. I'd just like to sort of reiterate kind of what's going on is that the Carrizo Comecrudo tribe has been working on sort of establishing along their, sort of territory, which is, near the border, trying to reestablish a series of villages, starting with the Yauli village, to essentially build sort of a network, from my understanding, of points of not just sort of resistance, but also real education about sort of what the Carrizo Comecrudo tribe is all about, and to importantly for kind of this episode, to prevent the massive destruction of land that would accompany the seizure of 70 out of the 100 acres of the National Butterfly Center. So they've been working with kind of all these groups. Thank you very much, Juan, for coming on, and good luck as you continue your struggle down there.
Thank you, Brian. Appreciate it. Thank you for having us on.
You are listening to People's Republic with Brian Griffith. People's Republic originates on KOOP 91.7 FM in Austin, and it's also syndicated on WHIV 102.3 FM New Orleans. We are also available as a podcast on Spotify, Spreaker, Stitcher, iTunes, or wherever podcasts are podded. Stay tuned. We are very happy to be joined to talk about the Denver teachers' strikes that were just brought to a conclusion after 3 days of striking. The Denver Teachers Union was finally able to reach an agreement with Denver Public Schools about teaching conditions. It seems to have been a very kind of positive outcome for the teachers, and we're very happy to be joined to talk about all of this, to talk about the once again, the continuing saga of kind of teacher union fight back against these kind of neoliberal conditions by Maura Casados Cassidy, who's an ELL teacher and a union organizer based in Denver. Thank you, Maura, for joining the show.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited to see what's going on with teachers all across the country right now, because for so long there's been, just a continuing erosion of both working conditions and pay under these kind of neoliberal conditions. We've seen just the complete deterioration of education over the past 30 years. It's been enforced by just, continued lack of funding and whatnot. And so to see teachers fighting back is just such an inspiration to me. I'd like to get into sort of the backstory of what actually teachers in Denver were facing, first of all, leading up to the strike. Basically, there was kind of a 15-month negotiation period leading up to this. But of course, even before these 15 months, the conditions for being a teacher in Denver were, from my understanding, pretty stark. So I'm wondering if you can go into both kind of your experiences and the experiences of teachers in general, trying to perform this vital public service in Denver.
Sure. Yeah. I think I want to actually go back almost to 2008, because that's when this current regime, the current compensation system, and a lot of the policies that we're currently fighting back against really began. So our now senator, former superintendent Michael Bennett, was an architect of a system of neoliberal reforms that were implemented in Denver starting around 2008, one of which is called ProComp, which is our market-based incentive pay system that we've been under for about 8 years. So some of those things, including some other systems, the portfolio model of school choice, Denver's own school performance framework system, a lot of those things came into effect around 2008. And when the financial crisis hit, we saw these systems, ProComp specifically, that was designed to increase teacher pay, all of a sudden became a mechanism for hiding or obfuscating what eventually became a pretty unsustainable stagnation in wages here in Denver. So over the course of several years during the recession, we had, major budget stagnation, lack of money going into Colorado education, and teacher wages essentially haven't grown for 10 years here in Denver. During that same period of time, Denver's economy has actually been booming. Our population has grown like crazy. At one point, we were receiving something like 2,000 or 10,000 transplants a month in the city. Rents have been skyrocketing. Cost of living has been skyrocketing. So, what we were dealing with now in the current negotiation was those forces coming to a head. The stagnation of wages, which really looked like decreasing wages in real dollars, and the rising cost of living coming together to make it so that, many of my colleagues are working 2 jobs. Many of them are struggling to afford basic necessities. You see, professionals in their 30s and 40s living with roommates, living with their parents, and really generally having a hard time continuing to live in the city where we work.
Yeah, there's really so much here that reflects these kind of national trends. Every time I kind of cover this, the words change, the language changes a little bit, but the basic concepts there stay the same. So this ProComp is like so many other, kind of programs that offer sort of the illusion of incentives for quote unquote higher performance or whatnot. But very often there's no way to kind of measure performance, even if you accept the validity of standardized tests, which nobody should. But even if you do accept that validity of standardized tests, there are many teachers for whom there is no standardized test to measure in order to get the quote unquote performance incentive or whatnot. So what this absolutely becomes, for all intents and purposes, is a replacement of a replacement of what should be an increase in wages, even just to match the cost of living conditions as again, rent goes up for everybody, as just the cost of living goes up for everyone. It replaces the actual raise in kind of base pay for these very illusory one-time bonuses. And it's just, I'm wondering how that kind of affects teacher morale there. How does it affect teacher morale to have what in a way, I would almost compare it to kind of when you're able to decrease the actual minimum wage for people in the service industry or whatnot to something like $2 an hour in some states. And then, that's expected to be made up in tips. So then it becomes this kind of, you have to do increasingly more work just to make the minimum amount of money that you should be making in order to survive. I wonder if there's a similar kind of effect with teachers there as far as this ridiculous ProComp system.
Yeah, it's been really hard on morale, over the last few years. People at my school, for example, have actually seen their salaries decrease as the bonuses, which are variable from year to year, decrease. So whereas, in 2014, you might have been receiving a $5,000 bonus for working in a Title I high poverty school, now that bonus has shrunk to $1,500 and you may lose it next year. So we've seen growing resentment among teachers who've watched their paychecks literally shrink as the cost of living has increased. And ultimately, that was one of the things that united us in this moment. As we began this ProComp negotiation, there were huge walkouts happening around the country, strikes in West Virginia, Kentucky, Oklahoma. And a lot of teachers in Denver were thinking to themselves, hey, wait a minute, we have conditions that are pretty much just as bad as anybody. And maybe it's time that we stand up for ourselves.
And then, of course, I always like to get into the sort of why of all this as well. This is not something that sort of happens in a vacuum, but and nor is it, I remember for a long time the sort of a general consensus among teachers was that school administrators, or at least I don't know if this is necessarily true in Denver, but from other teachers I've talked to, the consensus was generally that school administrators and legislators didn't, quote unquote, didn't understand the needs of public schools, that they were just, they were probably well-intentioned people who just didn't get how hard the teachers worked. And now I think some of the layers are being peeled back from that machine, and we can kind of see it's more transparent to a lot of people now that in fact across the nation the kind of the attacks on school funding and the attacks on individual teacher pay are in fact systematic. And I think that's very telling with your superintendent, who is actually tied in many ways to the charter school system, to the point where the superintendent has a vested interest in ensuring the kind of defunding of public schools and the funding of charter schools. And maybe you can talk a little bit about what that's who the superintendent is and what that's kind of like.
Sure. So there's been a very explicit push in Denver, backed by, major money from the Gates Foundation, the Walton Family Foundation, and a local group here called A+ Colorado, to charterize and privatize Denver schools. This has been happening for a long time. Our current superintendent actually only took her position as superintendent in December, although she was the assistant to, or right-hand person to, the former superintendent, Tom Boasberg, who was the right-hand person to Michael Bennett, who is now our U.S. Senator. So it's been a long train of school reformer, neoliberal school reformer leadership here in Denver. And those folks have been working on a campaign of different policies, linked policies, that all kind of coalesce to achieve a couple of goals, right? One of them is the deprofessionalization of teachers and the marginalization of our collective bargaining power. And so, one of the things that we've seen from this pay system is that it has incentives built in to attract a new crop of fresh-faced 22-year-olds, many of whom have come from programs like Teach for America, although Denver had its own brand called the Denver Teacher Residency, which was a similar thing. Attract young teachers, burn them out in a couple of years, and offer no incentive to stay and develop as a career educator. So that's one of those things that I've seen firsthand, the importance of having career educators by your side. This is my 8th year in the classroom, but it's only my 2nd year in Denver public schools. And so as we've entered into this fight, having those career educators by my side who say, I've seen it all. I've been in the union for 25 years, and here's what we're going to do. That has given us so much strength. And I think that's part of what these neoliberal policies have tried to fight against, is knowing the power of the institutional memory of career educators who have deep roots in the community. They've tried to target and remove those folks from our district and from our profession.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I really, seeing the kind of effects of these god-awful programs, these destructive programs like Teach for America, this is clearly sort of a kind of war of attrition in some ways, to just, to get this kind of entrenched institution out, while, essentially bringing in these essentially very little more than kind of scabs in many ways, because Teach for America pays so little. Teach for America, it's in many ways not really teaching. You don't get the same sort of professional certification, nor do you get the same kind of professional guidance. You don't get the same training. So it's designed absolutely to burn out very young people who might think they're wanting to be educators but aren't really getting the sort of training that they need to be real educators. I'm wondering, if maybe we can move on a little bit, and unless there's anything else we have to touch on that, or you'd like to touch on that. I'd like to turn to the actual way that this strike played out, because this was an incredible 3-day strike that led to such a real major concessions from DPS and major gains for teachers. And I'm wondering if we can talk about first, how this strike came together, at what sort of point that decision was made to strike, sort of the different kind of groups that were aligned with that, whether there was a kind of a difference between Denver teachers or within Denver teachers rather, and sort of the tactics that were used by the schools to try and fight this as they brought in scabs to do so.
Sure. So the negotiations started 15 months ago last spring, and we were actually coming off of negotiations of our master contract. And there had been a lot of disappointment in the deal that we ultimately took in the master contract negotiation. We made a lot of concessions that ended up being bad for teachers. And so there was some fighting spirit and some discontent among the rank and file. And as we began these negotiations, like I said, we were seeing the strikes begin to happen around the country. At that point, we negotiated pretty fruitlessly for 2 or 3 months with the district. The district didn't bring any counter proposals. They barely even acknowledged us in these public negotiation sessions. So I believe in about May of last year, we agreed that we would not extend our contract any further than January 18th of 2019. And that was because the district had previously resolved issues in negotiations by saying, let's just extend, let's extend and extend and extend. And we'd been on the heels of about 5 years of extensions with no real negotiation and no real deal reached. So we said, all right, we're putting our foot down. If we can't reach a deal by January 18th, we'll take a strike vote. And it took several months, even after that, for the district to start taking us seriously. Throughout the summer, the district didn't bring any proposals. We would have negotiating sessions where the district would send one lawyer without any decision-making power to a room of 500 teachers. And it wasn't until late in the fall that we started to see any real movement or any real intention from the district to negotiate with us at all. And I think that's because the threat of the strike became more credible. So we ultimately had very little progress with the district over the fall and into the winter. And our strike vote ended up passing with a 93% margin. So, that's a really, really high level of confidence from our bargaining unit. And I think that happened because of the intense frustration of 15 months of bargaining in bad faith, that we hadn't seen any serious consideration of our very real problems from the district. So when we took that strike vote, we then entered into a period of limbo, essentially, because here in Colorado, there are laws that go back actually to the Ludlow massacre that allow the state to take jurisdiction in the event that they declare a strike is a threat to the public safety. And so as soon as our strike vote passed, the district requested state intervention to stop the strike. And over the course of about 2 weeks, as we waited for the state to deliberate on whether or not they would intervene, the district rolled out a series of pretty unreasonable and outrageous intimidation tactics. One of which I think got a lot of national attention, and rightly so, was the intimidation of teachers who are here on visas. So here in Denver, we have a pretty robust bilingual education program for all of our schools, K through 12, which means we have a lot of teachers who are here on visas, especially from Latin America. And the district ended up sending an email out to all teachers who are here on work visas, essentially threatening them if they participated in the strike that they would be reported to ICE. And later, about 24 hours later, retracted that email, but of course the damage was done. In this kind of a political climate, to threaten immigrant teachers with, taking away their legal status in this country is insane. It's something that we are proud to call ourselves, a sanctuary city, to say that our schools are sanctuaries for our immigrant students. And yet, of course, how can we say that when our leadership is directly threatening teachers? with deportation. So, that was one, incredibly outrageous tactic from the district. They also attempted to recruit furloughed federal workers during the government shutdown to act as scabs.
Jesus.
So they held fairs for furloughed government workers and said that they would expedite their background checks and substitute licenses. They threatened school nurses with the loss of their license if they didn't delegate their licenses over while they were on strike. So, there was kind of just one after another incredibly outrageous intimidation tactics coming from the district. And the ultimate effect of that was it really took the mask off of the district's PR machine, which had previously been, making incredible overtures to say, well, the reason why we're stuck in negotiations is because we're the ones who really care about equity in our district. We really care about fairness for all students. And, they had really been, their 40-person communications team downtown had really been playing the game to appear as if they were the good guy. But of course, once these intimidation tactics got a little bit of press, it became clear that in fact they weren't the good guys, and that ultimately fueled our intensity in the strike, I think, even more.
Jesus, I mean, it's not that any of this is unprecedented, but just hearing it laid out that the district threatened to call ICE on immigrant teachers, that they threatened, to suspend the license of school nurses, that they just did all this. And in the meantime, if I recall correctly, they had tried to, essentially try another kind of PR stunt on Twitter or whatnot, where they invited over Twitter the union to, bargaining agreement or whatnot. They said, come sit down at the table with us. Meanwhile, all of this was going on under the surface. This is what they were doing. These draconian Trumpian tactics is just kind of mind blowing that they would be trying all this nonsense.
Yeah, I mean, there was just an incredible level of duplicity and dishonesty coming from the district, even during the strike. As we began on the first day of striking, the district insisted on keeping schools open, which, we teachers had maintained was a safety issue for our students, especially our younger students. But on that first day of the strike, a video came out from Denver's largest high school, one of its flagship high schools, East High School, of students moshing, essentially. To really, really loud music and being, out of control in the hallways of that school because they had no schedule. They had no teachers. They had no classes. And that same day, our superintendent called a press conference to announce that there was business as usual in schools, and that children were learning, and that nothing unusual had happened. So, it's kind of, it's double speak. And the public here in Denver wasn't buying it any more than we were.
Yeah, so we're it seems like there was certainly a lot of public support. I didn't see a whole lot of other than sort of the comments of like local news or whatnot, which is always just kind of million-year-old Republicans. Yeah. Other than like that particular subset of people, I didn't see a whole lot of people, and I think that this is becoming more true. Everywhere, where the public now realizes the kind of the kind of horrifying living conditions that teachers are dealing with, living and working conditions rather, and I'll just say again, it's really sort of encouraging to see all this. For those of you just tuning in, you're listening to People's Republic with Brian Griffith. We are talking with Maura Casados Cassidy, an EOL teacher and union organizer in Denver, about the resolution of the Denver teacher strikes. I'd like to also just kind of remark, just how the real power balance, that is to say, people think that there's so much, that their employers have so much power, and that their, that the kind of state has so much power or whatnot. But I think this not only reveals, sort of pulls the mask off of, the employers like the school district to show what they're all about. Again, as we mentioned earlier, the school superintendent in Denver was tied up, is still tied up, since still the superintendent. student tied up in, sort of charter schools, and so had a vested economic interest, vested personal financial interest in, trying to defund public schools and whatnot. They tried these horrifying tactics of trying to threatening to call ICE on teachers, threatening to suspend school nurses' licenses if they struck or whatnot. So we kind of get to this point, and yet it took only 3 days of striking to essentially completely change Denver Public Schools' tune, to change a school district's tune, because if you're a worker, the thing that makes you valuable and the thing that really makes you have the power differential with your employer is when you and your fellow workers are willing to withhold your labor. Because the truth is, if you look at economics, if you look at what really drives any economy, it is the labor. You can look up the labor theory of value to understand that a little bit better. But the truth is, that's the kind of horrifying thing that will kind of reveal the Trumpian mask off of any employers. When you and your fellow workers are willing to band together and threaten to withhold your labor, the mask just comes off instantly, and these people are revealed to be who they truly are. Your employers are revealed to be who they truly are, the bosses rather, and they are also revealed to be so powerless. And I think the fact that, to me, sort of zooming out to more bigger picture issues, when you look at this, like 3 days of striking got first of all, more than 15 months of bargaining had before. But more importantly, 3 days of striking got more than any sort of electoral, kind of maneuvers here in the sense of many. I don't know what the kind of political climate is in Denver, but I imagine it considers itself to be a fairly liberal city or whatnot. But the fact that like this kind of withholding of labor, these few days of striking, this real like union power gets so much more in terms of real life benefits for material benefits for workers than kind of the entire Democratic Party and the entire kind of a liberal democratic system can do in decades. And in fact, the liberal democratic system has been often complicit in these kind of neoliberal reforms that have caused the material downfall of so many workers in the country. I'm wondering how that kind of plays out for you locally, if you saw kind of that same thing.
Yeah, I mean, Denver is a city that is controlled by Democrats, but our Democratic Party here in Denver has been instrumental, absolutely, in developing these and promulgating these neoliberal school reforms that have ultimately, decreased student achievement, decreased the quality of working conditions for teachers, and brought us to this point, this breaking point as a workforce. So we have very little trust in our local Democrats, and furthermore, we are facing a situation where 5 out of the 7 members of our school board here in Denver are strongly affiliated with A+ Colorado, the lobbying group that supports these reforms, and a group called Democrats for Education Reform. So we have a very hostile school board here in Denver. And, that's something that there's been a lot of hemming and hawing over in the education scene here in town. But you're right. After 3 days of striking, it didn't matter that 5 out of 7 of the school board members were against us, because we shut the city down, and they were forced to acquiesce to our demands. So, I think the bottom line is, not only were the teachers united on this one goal, and not only were we, doing the kind of organizing that puts us out in the community so people see what's going on, but we also had an enormous amount of support from students and parents, from the community, from labor. As much as the district wanted to push the narrative, and, this is can be especially difficult for teachers. They push the narrative that, we're endangering our students by walking off the job, right? That we're hurting children, which of course to people like us who have dedicated our entire lives to helping children is a really difficult thing to hear. But we know, and the community knows, that people who've dedicated their lives to helping young people wouldn't do something like this if it wasn't ultimately going to help our students. And so we had that credibility within the community. We had, on the picket line, every other car was honking, and seeing the community come out to feed us, seeing student walkouts happen spontaneously at all of the big high schools around town, it really built us up. And it gave us the strength and the confidence to remember that, the district is lying about us. We do care about our students, and we wouldn't be doing this if it weren't for them.
Yeah, that's absolutely incredible. So we have a couple minutes left. If there's, for those who might be teachers or might just be workers who are thinking about this, who have been looking at what's going on in Denver or West Virginia or I think there was Oklahoma, LA, who've been seeing this everywhere. Where can people go to sort of get involved, either more with their union or otherwise? Where can people go kind of for more information about the way forward and what's been done here?
One of the things that we learned is that we make up the union, and that regular people, even when we're tired, can move mountains. And that as soon as, regular rank and file teachers started to show up to bargaining and started to show up to these organizing meetings, we were able to organize incredible things. So regardless of whether you are a unionized worker or not a unionized worker, I think my recommendation from this experience would be to show up and start having conversations about fair working conditions with your colleagues, and thinking about what are the levers of power that are available to you. One of the things that we learned was that we just needed to talk to the press. The press wanted to hear from us. We just needed to talk to our union. The union needed people to do work. We just needed to be there and be willing to do the work in order for it to take place. And that was very, very exhilarating for us, and it ended up being very effective. So if you want to learn more about Denver teachers, our union website is denverteachers.org, but we've also received an enormous amount of support from the National Education Association and from other unions. Specifically, the Teamsters out here were great. Our firefighters out here were great. There were plumbers, electrical workers, Unite Here, many, many different labor groups who were active in supporting us during this strike.
Yeah, and I think, on kind of my last point, I'd like to also add that solidarity across professions is so important, too, because so many people think they can kind of rely on, their profession as being more professionalized or whatnot, and say, I deserve more money because I'm in this profession or whatnot. But the truth is that everyone deserves fair working conditions, that we have to stand, even if overall, like, someone in a field makes more money than the people in your field or whatnot, the truth is we are all exploited as workers, and the way to move forward to ensure all of our, to ensure the end of all of our exploitation is to come together as workers in the way, in the way that Denver teachers did, and to show that kind of solidarity across all professions, to understand that we have so much more in common than what divides us. And I think that's so, is so important and so kind of inspirational and instructive here. So we are going to have to leave it there. We've been joined by Maura Casados Cassidy, who's an ELL teacher and a union organizer in Denver. Thank you very much, Maura, for coming on, and congratulations on the new gains made by Denver teachers there.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me.
That's all we have for this week. You have been listening to People's Republic with Brian Griffith. People's Republic is produced at KOOP Community Radio in Austin, Texas, and is also syndicated on WHIV 102.3 FM in New Orleans. You can find our show on SoundCloud, iTunes, Spreaker, Spotify, and Stitcher by typing in People's Republic, or you can visit us on Facebook and Twitter at People's Radio ATX. Thanks for listening as we report on the global struggle for social and economic justice. We are out of here.